Led by the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, the United States has accumulated roughly a dozen warships within Venezuelan territorial waters. This is a part of a military buildup known as Operation Southern Spear. Though the operation is engaged with thwarting narcotics operations, many also view it as a precursor to a potential large-scale invasion of Venezuela should the Trump administration decide to take that route. But a CNN article warning that history could repeat itself if the U.S. carries out military action. Reading in part, experts who have modeled what would happen if Trump went ahead with even limited strikes warn Venezuela could see mass displacement and a new refugee surge like the 2017 crisis Trump blames on Maduro that led to thousands of Venezuelans moving to the U.S. And with that, we'll welcome in Ryan Berg with the CSIS Future of Venezuela Initiative and is the director of the CSIS Americas program. He's joined by Hal Kempfer, a retired lieutenant colonel with the U.S. Marines and the host of the Strat podcast. All right, great to see both of you. Colonel, great to see you again as well. Let me start, if I can, though, with Ryan. Given the crackdown policies that we've seen with ICE agents here in the States and obviously the boat strikes that we've seen in the Caribbean and elsewhere, that article, does that stand out to you, Ryan, in terms of perhaps some of the outcomes or consequences, if you will, of going into on the ground in Venezuela?
Well, thanks for having me on and good morning. I think that there are risks involved in any operation in Venezuela, but let me just say at the top that I don't think it's within Trump's modus operandi to put boots on the ground in Venezuela. Few people, if any, are talking about boots on the ground in Venezuela. What we're talking about is a potential air campaign that could get the Venezuelan armed forces to think that their loyalties lie elsewhere, an air campaign focused on drug trafficking targets and that nexus between the state and criminal groups in Venezuela. That said, any transition is not going to be seamless. It's not going to be perfect. Transitions are always messy. If you look at the history of Latin American transitions away from military dictatorships, there are always difficult decisions to be made about who gets immunity from prosecution and who has to face judgment for their activities, specifically crimes against humanity and other human rights abuses. But the last thing I would say here is the transition team, I should say that the team of Maria Corina Machado in Venezuela has shared with the Trump administration transition plans. And what has been reported publicly is how impressed the administration is with some of those transition plans, that these are well advanced, far more advanced than they anticipated them being. So people are thinking about this, and it's clear that they're trying to minimize some of the messiness that we anticipate if indeed we get to a situation of transition.
Colonel, if Maduro is overthrown, it doesn't ensure the next regime would usher in an era of peace and prosperity for Venezuela in terms of this article from Newsweek. It's an opinion piece, so I wanted to share that with you. Maybe you have a different opinion on what could happen next. It says this: historically speaking, changing one regime for another through the force of arms can cause more problems than it solves. The haves turn into have-nots, and those who previously profited from the old order could just as easily pick up a gun to battle the new one to protect what they still have. The absolute worst thing Trump could do is fail to ask the most fundamental question of them all. If Maduro departs, what is next? Colonel, I'm sure you've been watching the actions closely that involve the U.S., Venezuela, President Trump. Are you confident where the administration is at this point in handling the Maduro regime?
Well, Sean, it's difficult to tell because we don't see all the secret plans are out there. We don't see all the classified information. You know, what we do know is President Trump has said the CIA has been involved with clandestine or covert activities down there. That certainly keeps Maduro looking over his shoulder. He's wondering if maybe some of his generals got paid off or some other folks in the security forces. So that's one way of kind of paving the road to what might be regime change. Of course, the other part is, and it is a good point. I saw this up close and personal in Iraq, which is we got to deal with what comes after, you know, when Maduro leaves. And that's where Machado needs to really almost move in like a shadow government very quickly. The opposition has to start filling offices, filling positions, have a plan of action, not, I could say day one, but certainly as quickly as possible. You want to close that gap of uncertainty. You want to close that gap of change and turmoil. And then the other part is that there has to be a robust backup. In other words, the U.S. has to back up the new regime coming in. President Trump yesterday kind of alluded to he's not ruling out boots on the ground. I don't think he wants to put troops in there, but he's certainly looking at what forces he will have to keep by and how he would employ them in order to help the new regime kind of establish itself.
Yeah, let me ask you about the drone strikes, or rather the strikes on the alleged drug smuggling cartels, those boats, which the one on September 2nd, that specific strike has been a headache for this administration. The double tap strike, allegations of potential war crimes, they're everywhere. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, though, still seemingly having the backing of President Trump. Here's some recent remarks on that.
Whatever he decides is okay with me. So every boat we knock out of the water, every boat, we save 25,000 American lives. That was a boat loaded up with drugs. I saw the video. They were trying to turn the boat back to where it could float. And we didn't want to see that because that boat was loaded up with drugs.
So interesting points, obviously, in saving American lives, statements that were made by the president. Ryan, there's a lot of calls to see this full video for the American people to make this public. We've seen the other videos. Talk to us about that. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, President Trump on this. Where do you fall with that?
Well, it's very difficult to say without having seen the video. And right now what we have are two competing or multiple competing narratives playing out in the media right now by those who are privileged to sit on the intel committees in the House and the Senate and to have seen the video. And as you can imagine, this has taken on a bit of a partisan narrative as well. The key question, I think, from a legal perspective, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but as far as I understand international law, is that the key question here will be whether the individuals who were killed in the double tap element of the strike were in fact trying to do something to get back into the fight. Were they trying to get back into the vessel? Were they trying to communicate with another vessel that could have been in the area? Were they trying to continue their drug run in any way? That's certainly what the Defense Secretary, the Trump administration, is asserting, but it's just really difficult to say without having seen the video. And the last thing I'll say is that in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which will be debated before the House and Senate later this week, there is an element right now, a part of that bill that calls on the Defense Department to declassify the video and to release it to the public. So if that is not amended as is, there could be a major push in the NDAA and pressure from the Congress to release that video for the public to see.
All right, Ryan Berg joining us, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer out of time. Colonel, thank you for that. Ryan, thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks very much.
Netflix versus Paramount in a race to purchase Warner Brothers and all that